Braves country. Any folks out there who aren't even Braves fans, you might get something out of this segment. This is the Once Upon a Pastime series we're going to do from time to time. And today we're going to look at some of the more colorful folks in the history of Major League Baseball. And the one that I want to start off with is Mr. Doc Ellis. He was known as quite the interesting fellow. Doc Ellis, just to give you an idea of who he was, what his actual baseball career was. Pitched for the Pittsburgh Pirates and from 68 to 75, then went to the Yankees for a couple of years in 76 and 77. Traded to the A's in 77, and then finished off his career with 3 years with Texas. And towards the end of the 79 season, was picked up by the Mets and then finished it with the Pittsburgh Pirates. All in all, 138 wins, 119 losses, 3.46 ERA. And all in all, a pretty darn good player. But what is he most known for in the history of Major League Baseball? He is known for throwing a no-hitter in 1970 for the Pittsburgh Pirates on LSD. He claims, now whether you want to buy the story or not, but whether it's true or not, Doc Ellis threw a no-hitter in 1970. That part's true. He was against San Diego Padres, very young franchise at the time. So that always goes into, was a legitimate no-hitter. We're always going to make those jokes, right, when stuff like that happens. But no-hit the Padres, 2-0. He says he was under the influence of LSD. But here's where it gets interesting. Ellis was high the night before on his day off and took another hit around noon on game day, forgetting that the Pirates were due to play a doubleheader and to play 6 hours later. And this is a quote from him during that time period, because I was zeroed in on the catcher's glove, but I didn't hit the glove too much. I remember hitting a couple of batters and the bases were loaded 2 or 3 times. The balls seemed small at times. The ball was large sometimes. It's like, what? And that was the old-fashioned, wildly effective, right? And that was Doc Ellis. And that's the best story. That's the reason why he was looked upon as a character. There were other things, putting curlers in his hair before the game, walking around like that. But his quote was, "I'm as high as Georgia Pine," when he arrived at the friend's house that day after the game. And he claims that it helped him. I don't know how many of y'all have done psychedelic drugs in your time, but I can tell you a little birdie told me once. We'll just leave it at that. It can, if it's real good stuff, you're not throwing the baseball. You're just not. You're going to lose interest. You're going to walk off the mound. you're going to see things and want to talk about things. That's one of the biggest things. You just want to yap. And so I'm always curious about that second hit if it was really a strong dose. Because it's not like drinking alcohol where you know what 1, 2, 3, 4 beers, etc., are going to do to the body in an X amount of time. These are wildly inconsistent drugs, but you never know. He could have peaked and came down, and at the time he was coming down, he could have possibly fought his way through it. But there's no way he's peaking. When people say, well, what is peaking? It means that you're getting the full effect of that buzz, that we'll call it. But basically, your mind's playing tricks on you. You can't make hide nor tail of anything for about 2 to 3 hours. So if he's on the other side of that, it's possible. But it's had to have been wild. Had to have been sitting there. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? For anyone who's actually partaken in such nonsense, can you imagine you drop and usually takes about a half hour to kick in, and someone mentions to you around that half hour, 45 minute range, it goes, well, we need to start warming up at around X o'clock, right? Whatever it was. Let's say he took it at noon. He's going to pitch at 6. Or the game's at 1. He's going to pitch at 7. He took it around noon. And someone tells him right around 1 o'clock is the first game starting. So we need to start warming up around 4 or 5. You wouldn't be able to comprehend it. You'd be like, wait, what? What am I doing? And in 1970, you're not going to your coach and spilling the beans and telling what happened. It was nowadays you could probably go to a coach and say, look, man, I thought I was off today. They're going to look down at you. But you probably could have found some way to BS your way out of it, even if you weren't honest. What you can't fake is people who take this stuff. When you take it, your pupils get dilated very large. Now, you're not going to quite look like I'm trying to think of that one alien that's pretty much all eyes, but you're not going to quite look like that, but your pupils are going to be dilated and it's going to be obvious to everybody. So that's why I question the timeline 100%, but it doesn't shock me that he probably had some kind of after effects. You could call it a hangover, but that's not really, it's a different bird. I'm not by any means condoning this. Stay the heck away from it. But if you've known anyone who's taken, they've explained it to you. And if you've done it yourself, you understand that it's not necessarily a hangover. Like your mind is still playing tricks on you and you're still having a hard time, concentrating. But anyways, a wild, wild story in the history of Major League Baseball, 1970. I mean, what are we doing? 53 years ago, give or take, whenever you're listening to this, right? June 12th, 1970. How about that? And you thought you lived a life. Hey, remember that old picture you'd see with Waylon Jennings in front of the Jimmy Carter and his wife, and say you might be cool, but you're not smoking a cigarette in the White House, kind of cool. Waylon's fired up a cigarette. You might be cool, but you're not dropping acid and or LSD. You're not dropping Sid and throwing a no-hitter in the major leagues, kind of cool. That's going to be a hard one for anyone to ever beat. Someone might have to really tell a tall tale to beat that story. So that's example number 1. We're going to go into some of these, and I hope you have a good time with it. The next guy that I want to make sure that we talk about because it's a guy that everybody knows of. And it's a guy also that, because of his personality, I don't think it's ever been given the credit of how damn good he was. A couple of guys today we're going to talk about like that. But one of them is Yogi Berra. And Yogi Berra, everybody knows of the Yogiisms. What they may or may not know about him is that he was a World War II, decorated World War II veteran. He was there for D-Day. He was driving one of the gunner boats, getting shot at. So if he never did anything else the rest of his life, he was a hell of a guy, hell of an American, right? But then he went on to, and I still say it, he's the best catcher to ever play the game. Everybody normally, especially if you get folks who grew up in the 70s, watching baseball in the 70s. I caught the tail end of his career, so I can't say I ever actually watched him in his prime. But most folks are always go to Johnny Bench. Johnny Bench grew up in a different era, but Johnny Bench had a cannon for an arm. Johnny Bench was a very good hitting catcher. Wasn't a great hitting catcher, but he's a very good hitting catcher. But this isn't about tearing Johnny Bench down. This is about what Yogi Berra did. Yogi Berra, 358 home runs lifetime from behind the plate in an era where catchers were typically known to hit maybe 10 in a year. More impressively, at 285 batting average in an era where catchers, they didn't hit their weight. His OPS was 830. OPS plus, which I don't give as much credit to, but it still tells you how phenomenal it was. His OPS plus was 125. 100 is considered solid. 1,430 RBIs. I don't know how that man with those short little legs got him, but he got 30 stolen bases in his career. Scored 1,179 runs. Was elected to the All-Star game every single year from 1948 to 1962. What? Yeah. He was the MVP in 1951. He was the MVP in 54 and 55. He came second in the MVP voting twice, third once. So 6 times a catcher was in the MVP voting in the top 3. And if you want to count the time that he came in 4th, that was right in that same stretch, from 1950 to 1956, I don't know if we'll ever see that kind of a stretch from a catcher. We've never seen it in the history of Major League Baseball. I don't know if we'll ever see it again. And that is just an incredible feat when you think about Yogi Berra. And he was altogether, he was an 18-time All-Star. 13-time World Series champion. Michael Jordan's the greatest ever. He's won 6. That's not even half. 13-time world champion. Now, granted, they weren't all as a player. The last 3 that I mentioned was as a coach, but still, he won it 10 times as a player. 3-time AL MVP. Heck, Michael Jordan can't even make the playoffs as an owner. That's so sad. And of course, he's probably more than being in the Hall of Fame. In an 85.6, really, Yogi Berra second ballot. Get the hell out of here. These baseball writers, idiots. So many of them have this rule they won't vote, especially back then. They're starting to bend. But they have this rule back for years and years and years. They wouldn't vote you on the Hall of Fame ballot the first year. That changed when they said that if you're not on the ballot, if you don't get X amount of percent each year, they're going to take you off. So then you feel a little more pressure. Well, I better vote for him. I can't be the idiot that is the reason why a guy like a Yogi Berra doesn't make the Hall of Fame. But back in those days, they would just, it was almost like the old thing with college football where you wouldn't start a freshman. They wouldn't vote for a freshman into the Hall of Fame. Even still, man, second vote, he should have been. These are the things when they say that Mario Rivera was the first ever 100% MVP. I 100% voted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. These are the things that make you go, what the hell are you doing, man? What are we talking about? Like Yogi Berra, of all people, wouldn't be considered not just a first ballot, but a 100% first ballot. There's so many guys you could go in. Yes. That's the one thing the Hall of Fame in baseball gets wrong. They're still the best Hall of Fame because it's still the most difficult to get in, but that's the one thing they get wrong. And they've gotten it wrong for so long, it's almost hard to overcorrect it. Because then you start putting everybody in, and then it's going to kind of it's going to cheapen. But to say that a relief pitcher is the only one, because remember Derek Jeter got in except for like one vote. To say a relief pitcher is the only one is the stupidest thing if you ever thought about it in the history of baseball. Babe Ruth, son of a... Come on. Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron. Get out of here. As my grandfather used to say, go take a long walk off a short pier. But what I thought would be fun to talk about with Yogi Berra today, because I just wanted people to, get an idea of who this guy was. War hero, the greatest catcher to ever play the game. Because I have to take the whole thing into consideration. Johnny Bench is a very close number 2, but Yogi's number 1. And if you think it's Berra, I mean, if you think it's Johnny Bench, there's 2 reasons. You're either a Reds head, love the Cincinnati Reds, and you're gonna die on that hill, or you grew up in that era and didn't see Yogi play, so you're always gonna get. And I get that, but if you look at it, he is the best. If you put Yogi Berra into your Google machine or whatever machine you use, the first thing that pops up is not going to be Hall of Fame, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be Yogiisms, right? It's the one thing we're all going to see, Yogiisms. And I'm just going to go over a few of them that I think people would enjoy, because it may be some of the ones that are a little less, known. Because Yogi did a lot of things for America, but the humor that he brought is unrivaled. So I'm going to grab a few of them and just kind of go through that. This is a great one. If the world were perfect, it wouldn't be. You think about it, it's kind of deep, but it's a great line. I did love the fact that he said if I didn't make it in baseball, I wouldn't have made it to work. I didn't like to work. I don't believe that. Any guy that fought in World War II and was on the 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 beaches of Normandy, you wouldn't have scared him off by much. But I love that line. I'm lucky. Usually you're dead to get your own museum, but here I am. Let me see. Let me grab a couple because I'm going to skip some of these because if you go through every single one of them, it's getting a little monotonous. This is a great one. Take it with a grin of salt. So I'm ugly. I never saw anyone hit with his face. You got to figure that had to be towards a reporter. I never saw anyone hit with his face. You got to love that. If you ask me, I don't know. I'm going to answer. It ain't the heat, it's the humility. This is probably one of the best things that he ever said, probably more accurate than of all the quotes. And this is the type of thing that, this is t-shirt worthy, mainly because it's small enough. I never said most of the things I said. I'm not going to buy my kids an encyclopedia. Let them walk to school like I did. What? What? I see how Sandy Koufax won 25 games. I really don't understand how he lost those 5. That's probably accurate. I never saw Sandy Koufax pitch, obviously, but I've seen the video and I know the numbers. That dude looked darn near unhittable. He hits from both sides of the plate. He's amphibious. Even Napoleon had his Watergate. Of course, that was actually after his playing days. That was in the 70s. But even Napoleon had his Watergate. You gotta love that. This one ain't really funny, but it's kind of funny coming from a catcher's. All pitchers are liars or crybabies. Why do you buy good luggage? You only use it when you go see people you don't know. Pair up in threes. We have deep depth. This is a famous one of his. It gets late early out here. If the people don't want to come to the ballpark, nobody's going to stop them. The future ain't what it used to be. Whoa. Is that not apropos for today? How can you hit and think at the same time? How can you hit and think at the same time? Slump, I ain't in no slump. I just ain't hitting real well. Never answer an anonymous letter. What? I usually take a 2-hour nap from 1 to 4. That's probably pretty accurate if you really think about it. Anytime I've ever, I almost can't do it nowadays, but anytime I try to take a nap in the afternoon, man, it's going to take me almost an hour to fall asleep. At least 30 minutes. There's no way I could do a 2-hour nap anymore. I don't remember the last time I could do a 2-hour nap. I'm going to wake up after an hour and sun's out and I'm going to panic. I'm like, wait, where am I supposed to be? You better cut the pizza in 4 pieces because I'm not hungry enough to eat 6. Years ago, I heard that quote and I didn't know where it came from. When I found out it came from Yogi, it made a lot of sense. I don't know who he was referring to, but he said, congratulations. I knew the record would stand until it was broken. Always go to other people's funerals. Otherwise, they won't come to yours. What? This sounds like something out of a country song. A nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. Any of you country music singers, there's your line for the next number one hit. Baseball is 90% mental, and the other half is physical. No one goes there nowadays. It's too crowded. He also said at one point, nobody lives in New York City. It's too crowded. It's like deja vu all over again. How many times have you heard that one? That was originally credited to Yogi Berra. And it ain't over till it's over was laughed about at the time as a Yogiism. But you think about it now, and people use that in the world of sports. And it's a battle cry from time to time. You can observe a lot just by watching. There's a nugget of truth in a lot of these, right? But this is the great one. When you come to a fork in the road, you got to take it. What? What are we doing? All right, that was Yogi Berra. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got a couple other colorful characters to get into. Braves Country, Once Upon a Pastime series. We will be back in a flash.
It's baseball season now, but hockey will be back before you know it. Join the Columbus River Dragons as they celebrate the team's 5th anniversary season in 2023-24. Season tickets are on sale now with no price increase from last season. Lock up your favorite seat for every exciting moment. Call the River Dragons at 706-507-4625 or go online to rdragons.com. That's rdragons.com. River Dragons Hockey. Get fired up. It's summertime, and that means the return of all the fun and excitement of Chattahoochee baseball at historic Golden Park. Bring the whole family down for a night of fun. Tickets start as low as $10 with a discount for kids, seniors, and active military. Or celebrate a special night at the park with a group package or suite night. For game dates and more, visit GoHoots.com. That's GoHoots.com.
Bowling's insane! Bowling is crazy time! Bowling? I don't think so, George. You get no rush from bowling. Rush? You want a rush? Drop a ball on your toe, my friend. Talk about a rush. You'll be throbbing. You'll see vision.
At Jewelers Mutual, we're a little obsessed with jewelry. Obsessed like auctioneers with talking fast.
50, we're going to fit.
Pop stars with auto-tune.
Yeah.
And dentists with asking questions.
So, how did he propose?
After they've put their hands in your mouth.
Great.
Yes, we've made jewelry our obsession for over 100 years. We love it so much we named our kids Ruby, Amber, and Opal.
Venti soy latte for Opal?
At Jewelers Mutual, we insure jewelry and only jewelry, which is why people who are also obsessed with jewelry trust us with theirs.
Hey, Braves Country. Braves Country HD is bringing you Braves Country Baseball. Braves Country comes to you every Tuesday night and Friday night and 2 bonus games every week. Hi, I'm Mac Magee. We'll be bringing you play-by-play, pitch-by-pitch of your Atlanta Braves. It's free to listen. Please like and subscribe. YouTube.com/@Braves Country. Braves Country Baseball for the fans, by the fans.
The most popular and most notorious star of the 19th century was Michael Joseph King Kelly, the sure-handed catcher for the Chicago White Stockings. He was so skilled at stealing bases, he once stole 6 in a single game, that he inspired a popular song, Slide, Kelly, Slide. He sometimes cut across the diamond, skipping second altogether when the umpire was not looking. Kelly drank as hard as he competed. Once, A.G. Spaulding put Pinkerton detectives on his trail and accused him of having been in a saloon at 3 a.m. drinking lemonade. Kelly was indignant. It was straight whiskey, he said. I never drank a lemonade at that hour in my life.
Braves country. And, well, we're going to tell the tale of Michael King Kelly. He played for Boston. We'll get into his stats real quick, just so you get an idea of who these guys were. Had a lifetime batting average of 307, which was looked upon as pretty good at the time, pretty darn good at the time. That was the dead ball era. It's very hard to get base hits back in those days. A 300 hitter was looked upon as elite. His OPS, interesting enough, is above 800. There weren't a lot of guys back in that dead ball era that had an OPS over 800. But he got a lot of doubles, triples, etc. And hit for a high batting average. Had 368 steals, 950 RBI. 950 RBI in that day and time was a lot, along with his 1,357 runs scored. He typically hit at the top of the order. Had 368 stolen bases and an OPS plus. Remember we just talked about that, of 138. That's up there. That is absolutely up there, because when you think about the Yogi Berra, where is with 125, that's a high. I mean, he's in. For folks who don't understand the OPS plus, it takes into account of everything going on at the time, including what stadiums you were playing in. That's why I've always said the number's a little goofy to me. It's not what, I would necessarily look at typically, but it does give you an idea. It gives you an idea of what's going on with the actual player that you're looking at in the annals of history. Now, he started in 1878, and he played for the Cincinnati Reds. Then he went to the Chicago Cubs from 1880 to 1886. He then played from 1877 to 1879. He played for the Boston Beaneaters. And we all know that they became the Atlanta Braves. Then he did play for the Boston Reds. And this is back when the National League, American League, all this stuff was starting to come into play, right? In 1890, he played in the Players League for the Boston team at that time. They were called the Boston Reds Statistics. God, would that name be popular today? Reds Statistics. Doesn't really flow off the... Someone eventually is going to be named the something stats. I do believe that we're heading for one day. There's going to be teams named. No longer will they be the Boston Braves, the Atlanta Braves, the Milwaukee Braves. It's going to be the Atlanta. If they keep the Braves moniker, it'll be the Atlanta Braves, brought to you by, and that'll be all over your hat. But I think there's more likely that you're gonna get an expansion team in our lifetime, I believe, that starts off with, because it's going to help fund the team. It'll be something to the effect of, take a city who doesn't have a team yet. Let's take Nashville and say Nashville gets a team. And Nashville, what's it known for more than anything else? Music, right? And you get something like the Nashville Spotify or the Nashville YouTube Music. It'll be something like that. And maybe they'll put music in the names, the Spotify music, and they'll come up with a logo that is nothing but that has a tune involved in it. But then you'll also have your corporate logo ingrained into it. That's coming. But anyways, back to Mike King Kelly. He ended up playing 16 years. He finished in 1893, the New York Giants. So he was literally in the dead ball era. It was shortly after baseball to become professional. Remember, the Atlanta Braves had only been around less than a decade when he came in. So the Atlanta Braves franchise, it's been all over the place, but now currently rests in God's country in Atlanta, Georgia, right? But so you're talking about one of the very infants of Major League Baseball. And one of the things you got to understand about this time period, I don't go into all the weeds of the history that's going on. We're coming out of the Civil War and all that kind of stuff. And strangely enough, there was not a color barrier until later on. So you did have folks from all walks of life playing in these leagues at the beginning. It wasn't the color barrier started in the late 1890s. There was a lot of political unrest and a lot of stuff went into that. And so that's why you'll go back and say, wait a minute, how was this guy in there? I thought Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. He did, because there wasn't really a written color barrier. And there never was a written color barrier. There was just kind of agreement upon the owners at the time around the turn of the century to push out folks because they thought it would run off. And honestly, these owners of any sport at any time, no matter their race or creed, they would have put the color barrier down and said, to heck with it, who cares, if they thought that it was going to help them sell tickets. But they thought the opposite. Whether there's any logistical reason to that, I don't think there was. But that was the theory. What was that, 130 years ago? A lot of things have changed. You know, it's not just the societal differences, but you think about other things that have changed over the last 130 years or less. I mean, it is a different world. And I'm sure, you know, if you think about, if you go to 1900, you take 130 years before that, different world then too, right? Because you're talking about literally under British rule, right before the American Revolution. But in the late 1870s to early 1890s, he played, first of all, that's pretty phenomenal. He played 16 years. Think about all the injuries that shorten guys' careers nowadays and all the medical advancement we have. And these guys played rough. They would run you over, spikes high, all that stuff. But he's one of my favorite players for a couple of reasons. A, you heard the clip coming in where he's talking about, you know, someone saying that he was in a saloon till 3 a.m. drinking lemonade. And he said, that's a damnable lie. I never drank lemonade at that time of my life. You got to love that line. Like, I might have been in that saloon. You think I was drinking lemonade? You got another thing coming. He wanted to make sure that he set the story straight on that, right? Not that he had broken curfew. The fact that he didn't want anyone to think that he was drinking lemonade at 3 a.m. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1945. Remember, the Hall of Fame didn't come around until 1937. So that was the 9th year of its existence, and they were only letting a few folks in each year. And how long they'd been playing baseball at that point was in the, what are we talking about, 70, almost 80 years at that point. So to be inducted in the first decade, you were elite. And so he got in as one of the just unbelievable characters in Major League Baseball. He is the reason why when you make a substitution in Major League Baseball, you're gone for good. He's also the reason why, because no one thought about it at the time, they're just doing it. He's also the reason why in Major League Baseball, you have to wait till the play is over to make a substitution. And here's the reason why. King Kelly would routinely be on the bench. A ball is hit, popped up in the air, or vice versa. He could be in the field and he would yell it out. But a ball's popped up in the air. And back then, you didn't have the dugouts that were actually dug in. These guys were just sitting on benches near the lines. The ball be popped up in the air in foul territory. And he would say, Michael Kelly in for, say, Joe Smith, who's playing, we'll say he's playing right field. He's no chance of getting to the ball, but I can get to it. Michael Kelly in for Joe Smith. He would come over, he'd make the catch, throw the ball back into the infield, and say, Joe Smith back in for Michael Kelly. And that's why we have that rule, because of Michael King Kelly. And if nothing else, he'll always be one of my favorite players. My next guy's my favorite player of all time. But if nothing else, you got to love that. You got to absolutely love the fact that he was that innovative. He was also known to, and this is what led to multiple umpires on the field. You ready for this? So back then, you typically had two umpires. You had one for the base paths, one behind the plate. The one behind the plate routinely was not paying attention because he was getting in position to see if there was going to be a play at the plate. So let's say there's a guy at third and Kelly's on first. And the one umpire in the field is standing at second base, right? The ball gets hit to a fly ball. And as it's heading towards the outfield, the second base umpire has his back turned, making sure the guy caught it. Home plate umpires position himself to be able to look at down the third base line to see if there's going to be a play at the plate. Mike Kelly would tag up. He would also do this on singles, where the umpire's turning to look into the outfield to see if the guy's going to make the catch. And he would run from first across the grass to third. Literally going first to third on a short single. Infielders raising hell about it, but the two umpires on the field didn't see it, so they wouldn't call it. They have a good idea he probably didn't do it. So they came up with the third umpire because of Michael King Kelly. So this guy, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He was innovative. He was absolutely innovative. Born in Troy, New York. He was born of Irish immigrants. His father joined the Union Army, and his father basically brought the game back and was teaching young Michael how to, because one of the things that always gets looked over in Civil War history is that these guys played baseball a lot when they were out there in the fields, some version of it. Because it was a growing game. It was very popular. It was catching on like wildfire through the country. And both the Southern and Northern, but the Union and Confederate armies, they were out there playing baseball to pass the time. Waiting for the next war. There's actually talks of when there's actually proof of when during the Civil War when they would have like a ceasefire type of moment and the Confederate soldiers would play against the Union soldiers in a baseball game. And then after the game, they knew the ceasefire was at a certain time. They'd go back to their quarters. How about that? Imagine that. Imagine us in the middle of a war with whoever and a soccer game breaks out. That's not happening nowadays. But he was, by 15 years old, he was playing on the amateur team. And he would jump from team to team during this whole thing with the National League, the American League, the Players League, and a couple of others. There were a bunch of leagues that tried to pop up. The Federal League. There were a lot of leagues that tried to pop up in around a 20 to 30 year time span that was trying to rival the National League. That's why it's always been called the Senior Circuit, because it was here first. Junior Circuit is always referred to as the American League because the American League showed up around the turn of the century. But leading up to that, you had a lot of different leagues. And so King Kelly would jump from team to team, whoever's paying him the most. And Michael King Kelly, after the 1886 season, Spalding, sold Kelly from Chicago. And yes, it's the same Spalding. He was a team owner of the White Stockings, and it's the same guy that names on the ball, and that same Spalding, Warren G. Spalding. He sold Kelly to the Bean Eaters for a record at that time, $10,000. Just sold him for straight cash, which they did that a lot at the time because a lot of them were spending money on other things. Baseball was just a small part of their income, and they would, we all know the famous story of No Nanette selling Babe Ruth to fund the Broadway play. But Kelly did not want to return to Boston, and Spalding, when he heard about the plans, said, quote, "Then tie him up, I guess, if he's really versed to playing there. We may have to be ugly about this, but he's heading to Boston." He had already planned to spend that $10,000 to start making baseball. This is when Spalding really took off on the whole baseball thing. He ended up going, but because of it, his nickname became known as the $10,000 Beauty. Because in 1881, actress Louise Montague had been also dubbed after winning a $10,000 contest for the, you wouldn't use this term anymore, but at the time, handsomest woman in the world. Nowadays, when you think of handsome, it's always sent towards men. But it was a beauty contest. It was like a Miss America pageant type thing. And so he became known as the $10,000 Beauty because of the same thing, because it happened in the same time period. But he ended up being a manager. He was really known for his wildness, his drinking, hell raising, all that kind of stuff. And that's the story of Michael King Kelly. In fact, he had a famous song dubbed after him called "Slide Kelly Slide." And it was America's first pop hit record. You want a nugget to throw at your friends to throw them off. Slide Kelly Slide was America's first pop hit record. After its release in Edison Studios in 1927, inspired a film version, Slide Kelly Slide. Kelly was considered to have been the first man to popularize autographing. He would go and sign things for fans. And he would also get out on the vaudeville circuit did a lot of acting and whatnot. Really talented guy. And he even, most folks believe that the poem Casey at the Bat, which I read in pregame before each ball game, Casey at the Bat, the famous Ernest Lawrence Thayer poem from 1888, most believe it was written about Michael King Kelly. Now, it could have been with Cap Anson. That's the big debate, but Kelly's right there. So that's Michael King Kelly. All right, when we come back, we're going to hit up another one. I wanted to do 5 of these today, but I think I'm only going to get to a fourth one. So we'll be back in a flash here on Braves Country, Once Upon a Pastime series. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, I just realized if they get divorced and live in 2 separate places, that's twice as many visits. Imagine if I had to see them both on the same day. It's like running a double marathon.
That's the beauty of baseball. There's no time limit. You have to let the other guy have an opportunity. It's not basketball. We can run the clock out and pass it around, foul each other for the last 3 minutes of the game. We're not running the ball up the middle or taking a knee like it is in football. You have to face your opponent. Your opponent has every opportunity down to the very last pitch of the game to win a game. That's the beauty of baseball. That's why I love baseball the way I do. The DH, I'm an American League guy. You know that. I love the DH. I understand the league people wouldn't want it, and I don't think they should do it in both leagues. Keep it the way it is. What's wrong with the DH?
Yeah, because if you put the DH in the National League, the American League would never win another World Series. It would make it an even playing field.
I don't think that's exactly how it would play out.
Armchair.
Now, for me, I wasn't good enough to guess pitches. I looked for one pitch every at bat, every pitch, fastball right down the middle. Yeah. That's it. As soon as I saw it, I would swing. So I'd look fastball down the middle every single pitch, and my approach was to stay right center field.
One afternoon on the Brooklyn waterfront, a boy named William Cummings, known to his friends as Candy, noticed that he could make a clamshell curve when he hurled it through the air and began to wonder if he might be able to do the same thing one day with a baseball. In April 1867, now pitching for the Brooklyn Excelsiors, Candy Cummings tried out his new pitch. Though it was outlawed, everyone started throwing the curveball. Purists were appalled.
You're listening to Braves Country Baseball on Braves Country HD. Braves Country here on the Once Upon a Pastime series, where we kind of go outside the lines, maybe stay a little in the lines, however you want to look at it. And I thought this would be a good one to finish off with. We're not going to get to a couple of guys, but I'll do that in another one. A couple of the guys that I am planning on doing in the future on this series, covering in this series, is we're going to go over Bob Uecker and his contribution to baseball, along with my favorite player of all time, Rube Waddell, and the stories about him. But I thought Candy Cummings, he gets no love, no look, and for good reason. You folks who love WAR, his career WAR was 36.2. It's not so great. Played 6 years. So he was pretty dominant. Played from the age of 23 to the age of 28. And in those 6 years, 145 wins. A 2.42 ERA, which actually back then wasn't great. It was pretty average, maybe a tad under, but not as like it, today. If someone left the game with 2.42 ERA, you'd be like, holy crap. But this was literally the dead ball era at the very beginning. I mean, he's playing for the New York Mutuals, the Baltimore Canaries, the Philadelphia Whites. Lord, I don't want to know what that was about. Hartford Dark Blues. I'm joking. The Philadelphia Whites was they often, just like the Reds, they named it after their colored uniform. And then he played for the Dark Blues for twice, and then the Cincinnati Reds. And the Reds, obviously, the Reds were originally the Red Legs because they wore red socks, and they didn't want to be called Red Sox because Boston had grabbed the Red Sox. So, in none of those teams, except for the final one, Cincinnati Reds, and I'm sorry, the Hartford Blues did play in the National League for a short time in 1876, and he was a part of that. So you look at Candy Cummings. He was born in 1848. And he is a guy that, according to legend, created the curveball. I haven't heard a very good argument pointing to someone before him, so I'm going to go with it. You got to understand something about that time period with Candy Cummings. Is he's playing a game right before this time period. So we're talking about the very infancy of professional baseball would have been just before the Civil War, about a decade or so, give or take, depending on your area of the country. New York saw it come into effect. They had competitive teams. I don't know if you want to call them professional teams, but they had competitive teams. New York City is really the birth of what we call baseball today. That took place in going from around the 1840s, 1850s. So Cummings was born in 1848. During that time period, right around that time period, the pitcher was just a part of the game. He was just to lob it in there. Then when it became professional, you wanted to win, then the competitive juices got involved, and eventually folks were like, wait a minute, why am I just lobbing it in there? I'm not throwing it to my guy. If I'm throwing it to, and a lot of teams back then would send their pitcher out to throw their guys. Now, this is the beginning. This is when you'd have, you not only were they lobbing in there, sometimes you'd have 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 people in the outfield colliding into each other. But I'm talking about when you got to what everyone looks at as baseball today, that really hasn't changed in darn near going on 200 years. It's 9 men on the field, and you're trying to get the guy out, and that started about 150-ish years ago, give or take. Cummings comes along, and it was just coming out of, you're not trying to deceive the batter. And so he comes along, and he is born in Massachusetts. In the area of Massachusetts, in that area, he is inundated with it's pretty much all baseball at this point. Remember, basketball hasn't even been invented. Football hasn't begun yet. Remember, they started football because they wanted men to stay in shape and stay tough to be ready for war, because we hadn't been in a major war in a while. Baseball is, as I always say, is the true sport. And he's growing up towards the end of the 19th century. And he discovered the idea of the curveball with seashells, according to his story, according to his biography. After noticing the movement, the way they would curve heading towards the water, he's tossing them. He thought to himself, can I make a baseball do that? Now, back then it was a little different, a little more difficult, because at that time, baseballs were not uniform, and you didn't have all the 108 stitches like you do today. Some of them had stitches, some of them didn't. So it really depended on what you had. But as the game evolved, and we got the Spalding ball, and we got the tightly wound, and we got the 108 stitches, and every baseball is supposed to be alike. Down the road, that's what but it all comes off of the invention of the curveball. And he's playing for the Brooklyn Excelsiors Club in 1867, an October day in 1867. And they're going against the Harvard College team. And he would later say, a surge of joy flooded over me that I never shall forget. I felt like shouting out I had made a ball curve, but I said not a word and saw many batters throw down their stick in disgust. And so it essentially changed the game of baseball. That was 1867. After that, once you see one guy do it, he's going to like, how's he doing that? Well, guys are going to watch you do it, and they just pick it up. But he essentially invented it. And I think it's an incredible story when you think about, he played 6 years in professional ball. What did he really, why are we talking? Because he invented the curveball, which transformed into every single pitch you can think of to this day that's not named the four-seam fastball. Because before that, guys were just grabbing the ball and chucking it. Now, the beginning of baseball, a lot of them were much smoother, so there wouldn't be as much movement if you tried to do what you do today. But now the different grips of a baseball, the way folks will bring a ball and grip a ball, the way that you would, you got your four seam, you've got your two seam, the way they snap the wrist, you've got the cutter, you've got the, all of these, it all came off of Sandy Cummings, and all of him saying, man, I wonder if I can make a damn seashell or make a baseball do what a seashell is doing. And essentially, he did. And I'm sure he was just absolutely shocked that it actually worked. This guy that basically changed baseball stood 5'9", 120 pounds. But he got into the major leagues and he was out there having people whiffing left and right, whiffing. Couldn't make contact with these pitches. The thing that I would like to know, because there were times in baseball that the rules have changed, the statistics have changed. I'm going to throw one at you. So this guy's invented the curveball, right? No one's ever seen it. In 1872, no, let's go to 1873. He's already been throwing it a year. Oh no, you know what? Let's do 1872. His first year in the league. He throws 497 pitches. What? Where was his load management? 497 innings. They didn't believe in that old, give him 5 days rest kind of nonsense, right? Where you at, Kodai Senga? With I can only pitch once a week. Shohei Ohtani, I can only pitch once a week. This guy was pitching once a day. But 497 innings off of 55 games, too. Think about that anyways. 45 strikeouts. And he was known as a strikeout machine. Now, the highest he ever got was in 1875, he had 82 strikeouts. But that was looked upon as an enormous amount of strikeouts at the time. Because people didn't strike out because it was a badge of honor to not strike out. You struck out, you were looked upon as a thumb. Useless. Worthless. What are we doing with you? And so that, to me, is Candy Cummings in a nutshell. The history of baseball. Guys rarely struck out back in those days because they would shorten up the swing and they would do the crossover and just tap the ball, put it in play, and see what can happen. The defenders were nowhere near as talented and skilled as they are today. So if you put the ball play, you never know. But that's Candy Cummings. And he changed the game of baseball. Guy that nobody talks about, but he changed the game of baseball. Someone would have came up with it, sure. But he did it. Candy Cummings, to me, for that very reason, is a guy that when you look at all his accolades, in 1939, we just talked about how often things happened. I mean, about how the Hall of Fame came in 1937. In 1939, Candy Cummings was in the Hall of Fame, even though he'd only played those 6 seasons. Because everybody knew the story of Candy Cummings. More people need to know that story. All right. Hope y'all enjoyed this little bit of baseball today. Once Upon a Pastime series here on Braves Country Baseball. And y'all have a good afternoon.
Goodbye, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. We're back tomorrow with another show. Well, unless we're fired, we'll talk to you then. Goodbye, sweetheart. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Guys and gals, it's time to go. We'll see you on the next show.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thanks for listening to Braves Country with Mac Magee and the Armchair Quarterbacks on 99.1 FM WQEE, The Key in Noonan, Georgia, and simulcasting on youtube.com/@Braves Country. Braves Country comes your way weekdays, 3 p.m. Eastern to 5 p.m. Eastern. Please follow, like, and subscribe today. Armchair Quarterback Radio, your first choice for Southern sports.
Something of the 5th of September. Something of the 5th of September. She said a lot that I can't remember. Something of the 5th. Can I get another cigarette, please? Can I get another cigarette, please? Yeah, I know I live to regret it. Just give me another cigarette, please. Can I get another cigarette, please?
You're listening to WQEE 99.1 FM, The Key in Noonan, Georgia.